Sure. So let me start the recording here. Okay, let's get started with session 2. We did record session 1, so anyone who missed it, who wants to see it, let us know. We can send you a link. But otherwise, Dom or Zig, whoever's starting, let's get going.
Thanks everyone for calling in today. Zig is actually going to kick us off. So again, the first portion of today's call will be focused on product, the second half of our product presentation from yesterday. And then the second half of our presentation, Brian Leduc, or second half of our meeting, I should say, Brian Leduc will come in and present on HVAC and control systems related to reducing the spread of viral infection. So with that, Ziggy, please kick us off.
Are you muted, Ziggy?
Zig, can you hear me? Rich?
Zig? Yeah, that's not a good sign when maybe we should text him or I mean, yeah, we got his. That's interesting.
His camera's working.
Yeah.
Zig, can you hear me? Zig? All right, so Rich, if you want, why don't you go ahead and take control of the screen and start your presentation, and we'll switch over to Zig once he's able to get his audio working again.
All right, we can do that. All right, and everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Sure. We're seeing the PowerPoint presentation, not the presentation running, but PowerPoint application.
How about now?
There you go. Yeah.
All righty. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the new products coming out and what we've also come out with. For those of you that weren't here yesterday, we are going to be using Poll Everywhere for a few questions. So if you haven't downloaded and installed Poll Everywhere on your phone, it would be great to do because we really want to get some feedback on this. You can just go to polleverywhere.com or get it from the Google Play or the App Store. And once you get there and install it and you open it up, it'll ask you to put in where you're going to connect to, and should put this in the front of it, pollev.com/ and you need to type in carrier C426. That's the poll that we're working with today. So it's carrier C426 is the poll. All right, so let's move on. So I want to talk a little bit about peripherals. We came out with smart valves in November of last year. These are valves that will communicate directly to our VAV and VVT controllers, and also just now released, as I talked about yesterday, the integrated controller, the TrueView MPC XP1628, has got the ActNet network put right on the controller. So these valves, right now they're in half-inch and three-quarter-inch valves because we initially released these for the zone control. So these are available in November of last year, and we have several different options. They come in two-way, three-way ball valves. We have pressure-dependent and pressure-independent applications. They come factory addressed, so you can just plug and play. And they have 3 different failure mode operations. And the power of it is the ability to have a communicating actuator network on the on the zone controller. Now, to be able to really take full advantage of this, you probably want to use the programmable controller, because what happens is this frees up the I/O that you were using for the valve to be able to be used for something else. So now you get some extra I/O in the controller. So if you look at an application where you're actually using the RNet sensor for maybe a duct sensor and maybe a space sensor, and the ACNet network, you haven't used up any I/O yet on that programmable zone controller, and so you get more capabilities in the zone by using the ACNet communication network. And one of the cool things is that 3-wire connection to these valves is not only communication but also power to the valve too. So you don't have to worry about installing a separate transformer and running power to it. You just run it right to the controller right from that 3-wire connection. So some of the benefits of using ACNet is, the valves don't take up any I/O points on the controller. You get exact position feedback. So when you're communicating with the valve, you can actually get, if you're telling it to go to 50%, you know that it's gone to 50%. You can get more precise flow based on the percent open, and which can lead to better balancing of the system. And these actuators, these are based on the Belimo zone type valves, which are, they have fail-safe actuator capabilities with supercapacitors built in, so you don't have to worry about any kind of spring. They can fail open, fail closed based on the part number, and we do also have a, fail in last position based on the part number. One of the things that this really enables, and we put this into the library now so that you can download it, is fault detection and diagnostics. With the communication to the actuators, you get the ability to send and receive valve position. You can get too many cycle alarms, actuator failure alarms, communication failure alarms. All those alarms are already built into the library. You just, they become enabled once you get the valves installed. So our first poll everywhere question is, we have these 1/2-inch and 3/4-inch valves. We are looking at expanding that line because of the integrated controller, which is a much larger piece of equipment. And we would see that you would typically use that in a plant environment. And we're looking at coming out with smart butterfly valves. So the question is, if we were to offer a line of smart butterfly valves, would you buy them? And don't, hurt my feelings if you think no, we're not, not going to use them. We really do want to get a good feedback here as to whether or not we should offer that. It makes sense, obviously, for air handlers. We're looking at trying to bring in a line of smart valves that would cover those applications. But, plants, where you would have up to, 14-inch valves, butterfly valves, that becomes expensive endeavor to switch over to that. From our perspective, we want to know if it's going to be worth the effort. Well, right now we've got 100% on that, and I'm going to keep moving because we do have some time constraints here. Another thing we came out with, and this just came out again in November last year, is our NSA line. NSA stands for Non-Communicating Sensors from ACI. And so we took ACI's, a lot from ACI's catalog, 172 sensors in total, and brought them in, put carrier labels on the ones that made sense to put labels on. So now you have carrier labeled product. And this is in complement to the NSB line, which we came out with about a year earlier. So there's some duplication, but, sensors can be like religion. Some people love ACI, some people love VAPI. Now we have, we give you a choice especially for temperature and humidity. But we bring some other things to the table with the NSA line that BAPI just didn't have. Current sensors and meters, free stats, enthalpy switches, sensors, things like that. So just to quickly go through some of these, you can get carrier branded offerings on wall sensors, room thermistors. You can get RH combo sensors, duct sensors. We have 2 and 3% RH sensors, so we can cover multiple applications. We have CO2 sensors, and there's several of those. We have a combo wall sensor. We have ones, and some of these, like I said, they may not necessarily have carrier brand because ACI isn't really branding them. They're third-party amp. So we have the ASense CO2 duct sensors as an example of that. And things like differential pressure switches, typical AFS 223s. Differential pressure transmitters are included in this offering. Free stats, a whole set of free stats that we have available to you. And like I said, current sensors, current switches, both adjustable and fixed, 0 to 10 volt, 4 to 20. We have that whole offering. And we also have these BACnet power beaters for sub-metering. We have a 3-channel model, a 12-channel model, and a 48-channel model. And all of those are in our catalog. And there's a whole series of CTs and VTs that go along with that you can, round out your, hook these up. Some of these are utility grade meters so that, you can get, very accurate readings, something that you can bill by. The documentation that we have online, and you can find this documentation on HVAC Partners. You can also find it on carrier.com. If you just go, my favorite link is carrier.com/IVU. That takes you to our landing page for our controls, and you can just go to products, sensors, and take a look at the NSA sensor offering there. The documentation is set up so that you have both the product data and technical instructions and troubleshooting tips all in one document. Usually the first page or two, depending on how much needs to be covered, is just a cut sheet. So if you need to submit that to somebody, you can just take those first couple of pages and give those as a submittal, and then the rest give you information on how to install it and if there's any troubleshooting tips with the product. As I said, we also, the NSA line followed our release of the NSB line, which is the BAPI version of this. Again, there's well over 100 sensors that we brought in from BAPI. That was done in February of 2018, and we have actually added a few more items to that line to round it out. A lot of this is similar in that there's duct-mounted sensors, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, air quality sensors, and some of the accessories. And just about everything we have is 10K Type 2 thermistor.
Hey, Rich,
Yes.
Can I just jump in real quick? Just to let everybody know, we're currently only looking at stocking the ACI version. If someone is interested in the BAPI version, obviously let myself or Steve know, but that's currently what we're going to be offering out of our warehouse.
Good to know. All right. Thanks, Sal. Yeah, and as I said, the NSB line's been out there for a little bit longer, and it's very similar. Like I said, the the ACI lineup is complementary to this, and the BAPI sensors have the carrier logos on them too. And as you can see, one of the things I don't know what we talked about is, I think Don talked about it yesterday, is all of these currently have the UTC bar on them, the United Technologies bar, and we have an effort going through with all the vendors to clear that UTC bar away, since we're standalone carrier now. The documentation for the NSB lineup is the same. It's the documents cover both the product data, installation instructions, and troubleshooting tips. Okay, that's a quick, hopefully I got time here to go through iView 8 now. We are working on iView 8 as we talk right now. I think the first alpha version I saw get sent around this week to start evaluating. So it's becoming real for us. And I just want to go through some of the features, some of the things that we hope will end up in the product. And we're still targeting fourth quarter this year to get it out, even though, the whole pandemic has, put a little wrinkle in our timing on some things. We're still hopeful that we can get most of this out the door by the end of the year. One of the big things that we're getting is iView 8 validated sites, which is a life sciences version of iView. This will be a whole new version of iView Pro. It's designed specifically for facilities that require FDA 21 CFR Part 11 certification. Typically those are pharmaceuticals, labs, anything usually that has some FDA oversight with it. You'll want some of the important things that come out of that is, it comes with a compliance statement so that we can let people know up front that this is, a compliant item. It still does not take away the need to have a certification on site. I mean, that's just part of the deal. But we will have a list of certifiers in different markets so that you have somebody to contact with and create a rapport with so that you can quickly get your FDA sites certified. Some of the things they've added, again, is change reasoning and tracking and reporting. There's a mean kinetic temperature report. Some of these enhanced trend reports include customizable valid ranges to indicate samples outside of ranges. There's management of e-signature files for operators, which is important for verifying these things. Ability to apply e-signatures for review or approval of scheduled reports. And there's ability to have the company logo to a PDF on all the reports. So the validated sites will be obviously a special offering. I don't know if you guys run into this in your market, so that comes up with this next question. Do you ever bid on CFR Type 21 projects? Do you have biotech, labs, and pharmaceuticals in your area? Maybe, I've talked to several people who bid on labs and biotech, and they really don't have the CFR 21 requirements. But if you do, we'll have a product for you. Okay. All right. Good. I'm glad to hear we hopefully will be hitting your market need with this. Another update in iView 8 is the support we're providing for next gen product, all the next gen hardware, the TrueView lineup, and as we transition to what is called next gen firmware. Currently the firmware that's in our XT routers and XT links and our TrueView products is the old firmware. We're working on new firmware that will completely replace all the microblocks, everything to do with it. And there's a lot of capabilities that we're planning on building into that new firmware. Things like hot downloads so that you can download the controller and it stays running. Things like changing a point without having to make changes to completely re-downloading the controller, and a whole lot of other thousands of items that are in our VOC for what we want to see in the next gen firmware. But what we're doing right now is to be able to support IPv6. That is being called for by some of our competition, and some of the larger companies that we deal with want to be able to have IPv6, not just IPv4, which is, if you take a look down here on the left, a typical IPv4 address is what you're used to, 172.16.254.1. A lot of people can even sort of memorize that. you can now put in an IPv6 address and put in a, that's a much bigger address to put in. So you can also, the other thing we're doing is putting in backnet tunneling support for the integrated controller. And I'm going to have to take off just for a second. I think there's something burning on my stove. I can smell something. So, Zig, if you want to move, I'm sorry, but I can smell something going on the stove here. I'll be right back.
If you want me, I can take over. Let me, well. Okay. Sure. Okay, can you guys,
Yes. Yeah, we have your PowerPoint slide deck. So if you can go ahead and put it into presentation mode, we'll see if that here it is.
okay, here's,
There you go. You're good to go.
okay. All right. Sorry guys, hopefully Rich's house doesn't burn down. But let's switch gears to some thermostats. So there's basically two types of backnet thermostats that we basically released relatively recently, meaning in the past year or so, year or two. Basically, there are three different type of pairs. There's the Connect version of the backnet thermostat, and there's also two pairs of ComfortView backnet thermostats. They're all designed for a commercial applications. So basically things like classroom, dorm rooms, hotel rooms, any office buildings are pretty much a great application for these things. They all have onboard sensing, and depending on the model, it's either temperature, humidity, and possibly motion. Again, they're all commercial type of applications, so 7-day programmable. They can work standalone or part of a backnet system. In the case of the Carrier Connect stat, it's actually also it's a cloud. It's compatible with the cloud, so you can basically remotely using an app or a web browser, you can access the thermostat. So let me kind of I got this thing broken down into two pieces. First, I'm going to cover the Connect stat. Although only one of the versions, you see two versions here. We are selling the 2.8 version. That was the one that came out a few years earlier. And then a year or so ago, we follow up with the bigger version, the 4.3 version of the Connect stat. And only the 4.3 version is backnet compatible. The 2.8 isn't, but they're similar, so I'm just going to cover them and explain the differences between the two. So they both can, work as a traditional standalone thermostats. You locally access them like you would with any thermostat, touchscreen, all fully touchscreen. You can also connect them to Wi-Fi and basically use a web browser or an application or a web application, web app to control them like you would standing in front of it. And again, in case of the 4.3 version, you could also integrate it using backnet MSDP into any of the building automation systems. So again, it's perfect. The backnet version obviously is perfect for when a facility where you have a lot of these things, so you need a central location to adjust schedules and things like that. These thermostats can be managed. There isn't a limit of how many thermostats or users can access the thermostat. So you basically can manage all. If it's a single type of facility, you could manage them all through one account. You could do kind of installation functions. You could also the apps and access is free for everybody. So your tenants can download the app and you could assign privileges to different thermostats. For each tenant, there's different privileges, so you could have, maintenance type of installer capability, or just things like time schedule, or maybe just a simple adjustment. And again, you can group them in any way you want them when you when you discover them, or when they connect to the cloud. So this is great for managing single facility or multiple facility with as many thermostats as you can possibly need. In the case of a 4.3, it is a BACnet thermostat. It's a BTL listed. It is discoverable using BACnet discovery with our tools, like, for example, like Field Assistant Library Pro or any other BACnet tools that do that type of function. It's a BACnet vendor ID 16, which is carrier. So that means is that any of the BACnet points that are discovered do not count towards any limits that we have in our controllers. This isn't quite, you will have to do third-party integration with this, with these thermostats or with this thermostat. So you will need a host controller to put the view and application files in it. So things like our XT Link or the TrueView, the MPC, or any of the controllers. Pretty much all our controllers support third-party integrations, just depending how many programs we can put in there. So again, you will need some controller to host the application view file for the thermostat. And these programs and views, we've created them, and they're available for you in our equipment builder. So you could, just like with any type of application, you could download them and use them in your one of the controllers that you can choose to host. So again, you could locally access these things just in front of it. It's a capacitive touch screen, so swipe left, right, touch like any kind of a touch screen that we're used to today. You could also access these things remotely through an app. These apps can be downloaded freely from whether it's the Apple or the Google Store, whichever version of phone you have, Android or Apple. Registration and accounts are free, so you could have 20 tenants, and they all can have their own app. Give them accounts with different privileges and access to different thermostats. And for bigger sites, it's probably maybe easier with more screen real estate, so we can be using our web portal to manage these things. Again, you could group them. Things are just times could be simpler using bigger screens. And again, all that stuff is available. Any programs that you possibly need to integrate these. Again, this is just a quick snapshot comparison between the two, the 2.8 and the 4.3 version. With the 4.3, we added additional output. So now you have more functions that you could assign. And also, too, the 2.8 version, to do scheduling, you really have to have Wi-Fi. You could put things in override and run it non-programmable mode locally, but if you needed to do scheduling, you needed the Wi-Fi connection, you use the app. With the 4.3, that has been addressed. Now the 4.3 is a full local capability. Whether you're standing in front of it using an app, you can do scheduling fully compatible with the local application. We added things like space temperature alarms, supplier temperature displays also added. And again, it's IEC 2015 compliant, Title 24 for folks in California. And you can do, it's a connect stat, so there's other functions or applications that can log into the stats, so things like Insight and Swarm Logic, which there's a lot of information on our HVAC partners for those that are interested. Again, does have both of these have one remote input, so you could use that remote inputs for things like remote space temperature. You could average it or use it as remote outdoor temperature occupancy input. You can use it for voltage detection on the economizer for title, for the IEC 2015 compliance. And in the case of the 4.3 version only, that can also be your supplier temperature input. Okay. These are the outputs. So the 2.8 has two kind of universal or reprogrammable outputs. The 4.3 has three. So any of those, like in case of the 4.3, the Y3, the O, and the W2, if those aren't used for, let's say, cooling 3 or heating or second stage of heating, you can basically assign one of these functions to it. Things like economizer, humidity, dehumidification, cool 3, or reversing valve can be assigned to any of these terminals. Same thing for 2.8, but you only limit it to 2 terminals. The asterisk terminal and the W2 can be reassigned to one of those functions. Okay, quickly just switching gears to the comfort view stats. The biggest difference between these thermostats and the Connect stat is that they basically have additional or different types of output capability. So the standard version, that's the ones you see at the top, they come in 2 tiers. They have 2 universal inputs and 2 universal outputs and 4 relays for a variety of applications that you may use. On the Plus version, you have 2 universal inputs and 2 analog outputs with 6-digit outputs. So obviously a little more I/O, more flexibility, more capability with it. So the key there is it has 2 analogs. So you can do things like controlling a floating valve and so forth. So the standard comes in 4 different flavors. The standard comes just the temperature-only control, the 24 volts. It also comes with temperature, humidity, and motion detection, 24-volt version. We also sell those in a line voltage, so 120 or 240. Again, same, temp only and temp, humidity, and motion. They are not UL approved yet, so obviously where UL approval is required, those won't work, and though we are working on that. The Plus comes in 3 different flavors. It's temperature, humidity, and 24 volts, and then there's also temperature, humidity, and motion, 24 volts, and then also we sell a line voltage version that has temperature, humidity control in it, but again, not UL approved. So the 24 volts all have all the typical agency marking and stuff like this. The line voltages are not UL approved. So, the applications that you can use with this, basically 3 stages of heating, 2 stages of cooling, 2-pipe, 4-pipe type of cooling and heating valves. And this is where you can use your 0 to 10 output. You could have multiple fan speeds. You can control VFD, economizer, all the stuff that you see here. You require the IECC 2015 economizer type of fault detection. You will have to use a BAS. So basically, all the messages, all the warnings will have to basically get pushed to the to iView, for example, or the other type of VMS applications or UIs. For Title 24, again, you have to marry that with an iView and have OpenADR running with iView. So again, integration, same deal. You will need some kind of a host controller. It is back in the ID 16, so these points do not count against any limits. And again, these programs with view files and applications are in our equipment builder library, just like for the Connect stack. Okay, and I guess the first question, or my only question, let me clear these results here. Have you any, and this is simple, have you or have you not used any of these carrier backlit thermostats? So I guess without seeing how many people responded, everybody that is online is familiar with them and at least have an application that they use this for. All right, so Rich, hope you're back and hopefully there's no fires.
Yeah, I'm back, and it was eggs on the stove, and it's leaving quite a smell in my nose right now. But at least we got it before it had to call the fire department. So.
But they weren't done yet, yeah.
Yeah, well, I pulled them off the stove and 2 of them exploded, so they were on their way. All right. So back to iView 8, and I think let me make sure I've got the. Okay, we talked about the iView 8 updates to support next gen. The only thing I did want to mention is, the other thing they had to do was add into iView 8 the ability to support backnet tunneling, and that's partly for Pro and also for Field Assistant, so that you can actually use the service port now to communicate to other controllers that would be connected to port S1 or S2 on the TrueView MPC-XP. All right, another thing that we are working on, it will not be complete in iView 8, but it right now is a proof of concept. And for those of you, you probably have started to hear about this. It's called BACnet SC, BACnet Secure Connect. We're trying to lead the industry in this. There's only, I think, one other competitor right now that is talking BACnet SC. And for ways of looking at it or thinking about what this is, it's really, you can sort of think of it as a VPN for BACnet. If you've got a customer that has a large campus and their network spans, multiple networks, or maybe even they use a VPN to connect, and they're concerned about BACnet broadcasts, and somebody like a school, maybe somebody trying to get in and hack the BACnet communication, because it is sort of open. You can see what's going on with BACnet, and you can see the broadcasts. Well, BACnet Secure Connect will fix all that. And what we're doing in this first iteration in our proof of concept is we're standing up a BACnet Secure Connect hub in the cloud, and you'll be able to have an iView system that will be able to access that BACnet Secure Connect hub. And there's several scenarios that we're looking at doing. One would be putting BACnet Secure Connect into our router, and so that would make a secure connection from iView down to the building on IP, and then you would have the choice of continuing BACnet Secure Connect in the building, or just using normal BACnet over IP, BACnet MSTP. Another thing we're looking at doing is using cell modems. So for job sites where you have no on-site front end, or for things where you may only be interested in the carrier equipment, maybe a chiller or a rooftop, and there's already some other BMS on site, but for warranty purposes or service purposes, you want to be able to connect to it. You'll be able to use the BACnet Secure Connect scenario with that. We're actually looking at putting BACnet Secure Connect into a cell modem. So, and then it'll be standard BACnet IP throughout the site. So that's one item that we're looking at as a proof of concept, and the other is we're teeing up being able to put iView Pro in the cloud. Right now that's the first scenario. We're also looking at other iView versions in the cloud, but we're actually looking at taking a full version of iView Pro, being able to host it on like an Amazon server. You'd get to it from a browser, and you'd use your standard browser connection to the Pro. The Pro would, talk side by side with a BACnet Secure Connect hub, also in the cloud, and that would enable you to communicate to items on site, whether that is to a BACnet SC router again, or BACnet SC enabled cell modem. So those are items that we will do, and one of the reasons we can start looking at this, besides the fact that ASHRAE just came out with a spec at the end in December 2019, but Java 11 helps us enable us to do this in the cloud, because Java 11 allows us to separate out portions of the application. Right now, when you look at iView Pro, it's sort of this holistic application. Well, now we'll be able to parcel out, trends and communications and, different functions within it, and be able to put those parts and pieces into the cloud as we see fit. So it modularizes the iView Pro. So that's the other thing we're doing, is we're moving to Java 11. Currently iView 7 is based on Java 8, And Java 8 is now only going to be supported by the open Java development community. It's not going to be supported by its parent company, Oracle. So with Java 11, we do get a more robust security model. We get modularity, as I said. We'll be able to split things up and be able to put iView into a cloud easier. And we get 64-bit libraries, which makes it faster and much higher accuracy when you're dealing with numbers. The downside is that iView Standard and Plus are 32-bit across-the-board applications. The hardware is 32-bit, the drivers are 32-bit, and so we do not have a way to transition iView Standard and Plus to version 8. So for right now, we will continue. If you sell Standard or Plus, you'll be continuing to sell version 7 of iView for those hardware platforms. Pro will move to 8, but not Standard and Plus. That does give us a good opportunity, though. And our opportunity is we can now rethink what we want for the next version of iView, a lighter version of iView that could be cloud, it could be on-site. And so this next poll is sort of getting at, when you consider a new light version, please rank the features that must be included in this product from most important to least important. So, these are some of the typical functions you have in iView, right? Trend storage, system backup, graphics, floor plans, alarm notification, user management, remote access, grouping functions, logic, live logic, integration, CCN support, all those things you can consider as functions. So what we're asking is, okay, when looking at a new light version, do you need all that? Probably not. Maybe you could sell some of these as an upsell and have a nice low-cost front end, maybe in the cloud, maybe on site, that would have some specific functions. And so I haven't seen any answers come through yet. I'm assuming, yep, we are activated. So, and I realize it takes a little bit to go through these because you have to move up and down. So I'll just give you a minute. Oh, we're getting some answers now. So we're moving into that. And I will say, while you guys are answering, one of the interesting things we have found is remote access has come up very big with this. And I think everybody sort of looks at it from their perspective as an installer or a seller, right? From a customer's perspective, I don't know that they would care so much about remote access or live logic, but I didn't ask you from whose perspective you should be looking at this, but from what I'm seeing, this is pretty much in line with what we asked earlier from some other folks. Is remote access typically ends up being very high, and so that does tend to say to me that if we're going to have a light version, we probably need to have a cloud light version because that enables remote access the easiest. I'll give you guys just another minute on this, and we'll continue on. And I see support for CCN's higher than I would have thought. I think Zig must be voting. All right, so let me all right, let's move on to the rest of this so we can finish up and get Brian going here. A couple of things that we're also going to include in iView 8, and this is great. A lot of iView 8, I think, is focused towards the installer and the engineering and the person selling it, rather than, some of these things are definitely benefits for the customer. But if you look at what this does, auto commissioning for VAVs, it provides the ability to do fault detection and diagnostics on VAV boxes. There's reports, there's a dashboard in here that gives you all kinds of good information on it. What's great is from an installer aspect, this is enabled for the first 6 months. and it enables itself when you first start using it. And so it's great for doing commissioning and checkout. You'll be able to get a report quickly and say, oh, I got issues with, VAVs 1 through 10 or whatever, however many VAVs you have on a job site, and you'll be able to go fix those through the report. If you are interested in doing service for your customer, you can sell them the license to do this, and I think it's on an annual basis that this will be licensed, so that they can continue to get these reports. And so for continuous commissioning, obviously, dampers don't always, damper actuators don't always stay on the shaft. Reheat valves sometimes get stuck. Things happen. So you can certainly upsell your customers on providing this as a service to them, to give them these reports and give them good information. And here's just an example of, we do these, the reports can come out based on, the system. So air handler 1 has 11 VAVs associated, and here's all the VAVs with issues. And it sort of tells you, what those issues are. And it's, this was done through actually a UTRC, our research group. So this was a bunch of brainiacs that came up with, ways to do prognostics and fault detection. And so there's a lot of, good algorithms built into this to try to get this data as accurate as possible. So that's built in. So look for that when iView 8 comes out. Another item that we're working on is, we have a sister company called Eco Energy, and they have this analytics suite that they deal with and sell to their customers, and it's called Insights by Cortex. And we have come up with a data connector that you'll be able to get for iView 8. And this will give you a health monitor application that will provide the ability to monitor the health of your iView system. It looks at the server, it looks at the network, and it provides reports. There's actually an app for your phone. And again, this is not really designed or meant for the end user or typical end user. I mean, if you got a big end user, that has thousands of controllers, they may be really interested in these kind of reports. But from a service perspective, you can give reports on, how well the communication's doing. If you've got issues going back and forth between controllers, it'll tell you if you're up to rev on your cumulative updates. So it tells you if if your CPU, if the processor that is running the iView server, if it's got issues, or if it maybe needs more memory, or other things enabled on it. So it's a very powerful tool. And again, for those of you that want to provide some service to your customers, this is another way that we'll do it. And this will come in as an add-on. We don't have, this may not necessarily be ready with iView 8, but we believe it will be. Another add-on that we have, this is just about available today. This is just a door status graphical integration to a Honeywell WinPack system. So it's very specific. This was actually sort of developed. The customer had paid us to do this, and they were okay with us saying, okay, we can make this available to the rest of the world. And really, it doesn't provide you any kind of alarms. It doesn't connect to control programs. It's just a visual, but it does give you the ability to know, when the doors are open or closed or in trouble or locked. So you kind of get a visual indication on a graphical screen with this. So look for announcement on this relatively soon. I think this might actually come out before iView 8 comes out. Another one we're doing is Linnell S2 on-guard integration. And, Linnell is one of our sister companies that does card access and security. And we will have a connector to the Linnell on-guard system. And we will have a couple of add-ons that will do some pretty cool things. One is an integrated alarm management, to where, when there's issues, we can actually get alarms onto the iView system, and we can actually send alarms from the iView system to the Linnell system. So it's a two-way communication. And then we have this HVAC schedule optimization add-on, which based on badge swipes and historical data, the Ivy system can predict occupancy and automatically write schedules to zones based on badge swipes and schedules in the zones. So it's a pretty powerful tool. It's actually sort of predictive in what it does, and it will actually send schedules down based on badge swipes. So if somebody comes in, on the weekend, you don't have to worry about calling up the facility manager to actually bring on that zone or that area for them for HVAC or lighting. You can do it right through this add-on. And that's all I had on the iView 8 and peripherals. I want to thank you for that. Apologize for the interruption. At least my house didn't burn down. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Give me a second here.
Actually, hey, Brian, before you get started, why don't we pause here because I think we're going to go into the COVID presentation. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So why don't we pause here for a couple questions in case anyone has questions, and also we can give this time for a 5 to 10 minute break. If you have no questions and you want to walk away from your machine, let's shoot for 5 minutes here. 11:05 start for the next presentation. So does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask Rich or Zig from the first half of our meeting? And again, if you weren't on the call yesterday, the idea here, feel free to unmute your microphone or your phone and ask your questions directly. When iView 8 goes out of the cloud, are we going to expect licensing fees and charges and stuff like that to be incorporated?
Well, I gotta say we don't have that 100% figured out yet on how we're going to do it in the cloud. We do have, though, I think we have a partner identified, and that's Amazon Web Services. We are, when we go with iView Pro in the cloud, it will probably be, a monthly fee or an annual fee to be able to have it hosted in the cloud. When we look at an iView Lite, we're still looking at, what that base system looks like and what, if you want to build onto it. So somebody that just needs to access the system, get time schedules and set points, they may be, close to a very low price on what we would charge them. But then, you need to do trends, or you need to do custom reports or other things that build up the system. There would be fees involved, and we're still hashing that out. Actually, we have a focus group. I'm not sure if Sal's on that group or not, but we do have a focus group that's helping us decide what that looks like. Okay, so I guess want to take another minute or two and then move on to Brian?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so Brian, if you want to go ahead and get your presentation set up, and again, anyone that's not on the computer, go ahead and get started 2 minutes.
Okay. We'll grab the screen in a moment. Okay, you guys seeing full screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
thanks, Brian.
All right, so 1 minute and then we'll kick it off. All right, so let's go. Title here, obviously, HVAC control strategies to help reduce the spread of infectious diseases. Obviously, this is motivated by the pandemic, by COVID-19. So what we're going to cover is a review of current ASHRAE and other industry guidance on how HVAC plays a role in infectious disease control. I've got an overview of guidance specific to ventilation, temperature, humidity control strategies for occupied buildings. Also, a few slides in managing closed buildings and preparing for reopening. Most states, I think, right now are in various degrees of allowing reopening, so there may not be so much interest in managing closed buildings, but obviously reopening is taking place. We're going through some things with our headquarters in Georgia, and hopefully some of that will be of use for you. And then we'd like to share with you maybe some possible guidance in terms of how to respond to a customer that asks about possible changes to the operation of their equipment as they reopen, and then online resources. So before we dive in, a poll anywhere question. Have you previously done any research on ASHRAE or other resources looking at guidance regarding HVAC in response to the pandemic? So yes, no question. I hope it's live.
Sorry, Brian, my screen's gray.
Okay.
Yeah, so is mine. Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing the slide and people are responding. I don't. Do I need to set something here, guys? This is my first go around with virtual or with.
I guess what I'm saying is I can't snap to see your results for you.
Oh, okay. Well, it looks like at the moment 75% have said yes, 25% have said no. So,
Okay.
All right. Just another
Question
here.
1, 75-20, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I assume people are seeing it. 80-20. It's our favorite number, 80-20. Okay.
Okay.
Let's move on. I have another question. Have you been contacted by your customers regarding
potential changes to the operation of their equipment due to the pandemic.
You know, Brian, both your poll everywhere questions are showing up great. So it's possible. Are you sharing just the application and not the entire screen?
I, I have no idea. It says I'm sharing PowerPoint. What should I be sharing, Don?
I would have thought that would have worked, but I normally just share my entire screen instead of just the application. So that might be the issue. But
All right, give me a second. Just let me do that. So what am I sharing, Don? Content, web browser, my meeting window. Those are my three choices.
Should be up at the top where it says share content, screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, if you have a screen option.
Okay, so it's just share the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Working now.
Okay, so another 80-20. And again, you're seeing everything, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, that's pretty good. I think when we previously threw that question out, I think it was more 30-70 in favor of no inquiries. So this is interesting, and hopefully this deck is going to be of great benefit. All right, so a few things to keep in mind. Let me just say this is going to be a pretty dense deck in terms of information. Not a lot of pretty pictures here, but a lot of information. Again, everything that is in this deck was acquired from ASHRAE, Department of Energy, other industry resources, and I've got links to the sources of this information throughout. And the last few slides actually have individual links to specific documents that you can research yourself. This is the latest information available at the time it was assembled. Obviously, if you read the paper or watch the news, every day we get different information from CDC, WHO. This is the most current information I have for you relative to HVAC in terms of helping to limit disease transmission, COVID-19 specifically. I do recommend that you visit ASHRAE.org and check the links that are provided throughout this deck, just to remain current. We'll try to provide the most recent information we can, but it does change regularly. So this is the initial ASHRAE statement regarding airborne transmission of COVID-19. The short story is that it is sufficiently likely that airborne exposure to the virus should be controlled. And that really talks to HVAC. So changes to the operation of your building, including HVAC, can reduce airborne exposures. In terms of potentially shutting off your equipment in a building or a customer's building, that is not recommended. If the building is occupied, it's recommended that the equipment remain operational, and then again there'll be some specific guidance, specific changes in how it runs, how it should run. So a few preemptive Q&A questions I threw in here. Is there universal agreement within the industry regarding the guidance provided by ASHRAE, specifically related to infectious disease, COVID-19? No, there is not. Knowledge of how the virus is transmitted continues to evolve, and at the present time, there are no rigorous peer-reviewed scientific studies that clearly identify common HVAC systems as a transmission mechanism. The ASHRAE statement that I just showed you refers to the likelihood of transmission via HVAC as sufficiently likely. So the guidance presented by ASHRAE and other sources is considered prudent until more is known. There are areas of debate and disagreement, specific to the guidance and I'll highlight those areas through this presentation. Okay, we'll just cover shutdown buildings and then reopening, and then kind of get into the real nitty-gritty here. Again, there's no current ASHRAE guidance that suggests that maintaining ventilation in a continuously unoccupied building has any benefit in terms of infectious disease control. So if the facility is going to be shut down for a prolonged period of time, there's really no reason to run ventilation, run the HVAC, unless you've got battery or electrical rooms that do need to be continuously ventilated. You, of course, want to maintain some degree of temperature and humidity control to prevent damage to the building or the contents, but they don't recommend running your equipment 24/7 in an unoccupied building. That doesn't really make any sense, and it's extremely expensive from an energy consumption standpoint. Remote monitoring, though, is very important. So if the iView server is not currently in place for any of your customers, it might be a good opportunity to promote one and explain the benefits to the customer. Again, if there's nobody in the building to keep an eye on things, it's nice to be able to remotely provide remote monitoring. Okay, now restarting, there's probably a little more information here that might be of great use here. If a building's been shut down for a considerable amount of time, you want to make sure the equipment and the controls remain functional, identify and coordinate any required maintenance or repairs, even so far as to recommend recommissioning of a building that has been shut down for a prolonged period of time. One of the key requirements or pieces of guidance from ASHRAE is going to be increasing ventilation. And obviously, if your economizers are not working correctly, if the inlet grills have gotten plugged or anything, you're not going to be able to ventilate, period, increase ventilation. So recommissioning, evaluating the current status of all the equipment is and controls is a very important step in terms of reopening. There has been some guidance to suggest a 24-hour ventilation period prior to occupying. So obviously, to achieve that, you'll need to be enabling all of your exhaust supply fans, opening your dampers, zone dampers, run all the units that have fresh air intake. If requested, again, as part of a reopening strategy, this would be the time to adjust sequences and schedules to comply with current ASHRAE guidance. Obviously, you want to continue to monitor temperature and humidity conditions if you're going to be increasing the amount of ventilation. There's a link at the bottom of this slide to a webinar that was provided by the Department of Energy. Actually, Mead was a presenter on that, and it covered managing buildings, during a shutdown and then bringing them back online. Okay, so now we get into the real meat and potatoes, if you will. ASHRAE guidance for control in occupied buildings. Ventilation, temperature, and humidity. Right off the bat, ASHRAE is recommending increasing outdoor air ventilation to the greatest extent possible, as high as 100%, thus eliminating recirculation. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to do that in most pieces of equipment, or you're not going to be able to go to 100% in most pieces of equipment because it is not sized for 100% outside air on a design day. But the recommendation is to increase ventilation to the greatest extent possible. The maximum amount that can be realized, again, is going to be a function of the ambient conditions at any given time, the unit capacity, and the acceptable indoor temperature and humidity limits, which obviously is being utilized, is really going to tell you how far you can go with ventilation, your ability to maintain temperature and humidity. They do recommend disabling CO2-based DCV, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by disabling it. DCB strategies normally are designed to reduce the amount of ventilation before the below the design minimums, and they recommend that you don't do that. Now, again, as I mentioned, there is a lot of debate in the industry about this guidance. The equipment is typically not going to be able to support 100% outside air. I've linked to a white paper from Taylor Engineering. They're obviously highly respected in the industry, and they have their own ideas about this approach, and they really caution that absent any solid scientific studies specific to the HVAC part of limiting the transmission of the virus, that ventilating by any amount above your target design number is not necessarily going to be helpful, and it will come at a significant penalty in energy consumption. Obviously, if you start opening up that outside air damper on a design day above the design ventilation rate, it's going to cost money to cool that air in the summer or heat that air in the winter. There are some voices that are in opposition to some of this guidance, but I thought it was important that you be aware of that in the event that you're discussing this with your customer. They recommend disabling ERV systems if they're present, which could possibly have leakage between the supply and return airstreams, even to go so far as to remove the wheel if possible. I question whether or not that would be a viable strategy, but at a minimum, if there's a bypass present, they recommend opening it and bypassing air across the ERV. There are some other concerns about that I'll get to later on, but this is again the ASHRAE guidance. They recommend prior to occupancy going into a pre-occupancy purge mode for up to 3 hours. Current guidance on the maximum life of the virus is 3 hours, although again, every day there seems to be new information from CDC, World Health about that, but this was what the ASHRAE guidance was based on. Obviously, most of our controls have pre-occupancy purge cycles. The amount of purge that you can implement does vary based on the product. So the rooftop units primarily, whether it's ComfortLink or VAV RTU Open or RTU Open, there may be some variance in the maximum amount of pre-occupancy purge that you can enable. But the key is you do want to enable it wherever possible, and with the understanding that the system is designed with limitations to prevent pre-occupancy purge in cases where the outside air conditions are not suitable. So there may be limits to what you can achieve without modifications to the logic or the sequences. Other considerations, again, I'm going to probably repeat this more than once in this documentation, in this presentation. The amount of OA intake that you can tolerate is going to be a function of the capacity of the equipment to cool, heat, humidify, and or dehumidify. In extreme climates, maybe even places with high air pollution, you're going to have to use caution. There's going to be limits to how much outside air you can bring in. You also want to, as part of your startup evaluation, if you will, is to make sure the condition of the OA intakes are okay. Make sure that the building wasn't designed where the exhaust and the OA intake are right next to each other, which is obviously going to cause recirculation of the air, which goes against the whole purpose of increasing the ventilation rate. You want to make sure everything's working right. Your supply fans, your return fan, your exhaust fans. Your economizer has to be working correctly. You have to make sure your zone dampers are working correctly. So that all kind of talks to a recommissioning recommendation when restarting a building that has been offline for a significant amount of time. Changes in filtration are recommended, but again, you're going to run into limitations in terms of how much filtration a given piece of equipment can can tolerate. Again, I've got some slides that I'll get to here that we spoke with the mechanical, or let me rephrase that, we spoke to the equipment guys, the RTU product managers, to get their take on what some of the mechanical limitations are going to be. And you can increase the filtration up to a certain point. Beyond that, your fan's not going to be able to push enough air through the system to properly heat, cool, and ventilate the space. So if the customer does choose to increase filtration, you might need to make an adjustment to the differential pressure switches that are in place. If the filter switches are not there, and some of those are optional, you might want to propose to the customer that you add them, because again, more effective filtration will likely lead to a need to more frequently replace the filters, and the absence of a filter status will make it more difficult to know when that's required. So as Rich talked about the NSA and NSB sensors earlier, we do have a line of pressure switches that can be installed. Most of the factory picks, if they don't have them already, are designed to accommodate them. So last one is kind of an obvious point, but if the system doesn't have an economizer, can't really use it to increase OA ventilation. So other means of outside air intake and exhaust are going to have to be verified. And obviously that gets into mechanical changes and whatnot that customers probably not going to be real happy to have to do, but if they want to be in compliance with this guidance, there are going to be some hard decisions to be made. Question 2, again, as I said, I'm going to probably hit this point more than once. The existing equipment is not designed for 100% outside air. What can I do to increase ventilation with the existing equipment? Obviously, without mechanical changes, there's not much you can do. If the customer requires ventilation to be increased to the maximum amount possible, but within the boundaries of temperature and humidity control, the ASHRAE building readiness document does have a suggestion for some logic updates that will monitor the existing temperature and humidity such that the maximum OA damper opening can be dynamically limited. So how that will be deployed obviously is going to vary with what you have for equipment. If you've got field install controls and you've created your own logic or used library logic, that's all editable. If it's a pick, you can't really edit that logic. So if you wanted to deploy a scenario like this, it will probably have to be done in an additional controller or on a controller that happens to be on site that can support additional logic. The document I referenced is called the ASHRAE Building Readiness Document. There's a link here, link in the back of the presentation. So it has a little bit of a recommended sequence in terms of how to monitor the conditions and then roll back the damper opening to whatever is possible without losing condition. As an aside, we actually have deployed this or a similar scenario at the ALC building, the headquarters building in Georgia. So we actually have that under test right now, and in the future we may put together an application note sharing what that logic looks like, and such that you can deploy it again if your customer requires it. Temperature and humidity, specifically humidity. There is no recommended definitive guidance from ASHRAE on a temperature or humidity limit as a means of limiting the spread of infectious disease. There are studies specifically related to target humidity levels that suggest that an indoor humidity level from 40 to 60% is helpful in limiting the transmission. More than that, it does not gain any improvement. Less than that allows it to propagate for a little bit longer. Again, ASHRAE has not come out with a definitive recommendation for this, but there are some studies that ASHRAE has linked from their homepage that point to a study from a site called PBC Today, and also they have a document that's called the infectious, the PD sheet relative to infectious aerosols. Both of those are linked that do suggest that humidity levels between 40 and 60% might be beneficial. Now, the negative side of that is you might not be able to achieve that with the equipment you have. A lot of facilities don't have any means for humidification. Colder climates, now you'll have issues with condensation on windows and things. So again, like a lot of aspects of this guidance, applying it in the real world is going to likely be challenging in some cases. In terms of dew point, ASHRAE does recommend in 62.1 2019 that the dew point be maintained no higher than 60 degrees if the outside air dew point is above 60 degrees. And again, if you're doing things to increase indoor humidity, you have to be very careful with monitoring to avoid condensation, mold, things of that nature. You don't want to create damaged situations within the facility. So some additional challenges here. If you do choose to, if the customer does choose to increase ventilation, it might be beneficial to consider expanding the temperature set points a little bit outside of the traditional comfort conditions, just as a means of limiting the excess energy consumption that's going to come along with increasing the ventilation rate. So again, there's going to be limits to how far you can go with that. It's going to be up to the customer to decide, but you know, having, particularly in the warm weather months, allowing the temperature in the space to creep up a bit above what their normal comfort conditions are can help offset the increased energy consumption that increasing ventilation is going to provide. Obviously, that's going to vary based on the customer, the space, how it's used. You can make use of supply air reset. What that will do for you in a zoning system, if you will, is it will promote greater damper openings. So if the air coming down the line is a few degrees warmer than normal, the zone dampers will open more. That'll increase ventilation, which again is one of the goals of the ASHRAE guidance. Lastly, in terms of the Q&A that I threw within the presentation, you know, even partial compliance with ASHRAE guidance is going to come at a significant energy penalty. What can we do to offset those costs? I just touched on that a little bit, but one thing you can do is take a hard look at, can somebody use their phone? Take a hard look at if they are using an IVU system, what features are they implementing? Are they fully taking advantage of scheduling, set point setback, set point reset? Could you add lighting control, demand limiting of systems that have no impact on ventilation? So areas of the building that don't contribute to ventilation. So there's a lot of energy savings features that we build into IVU. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at how the customer is using those. Again, maybe some adjustments to their schedules, to their set points, reset, things of that nature, you know, could help offset some of the increased energy costs that raising ventilation rates are going to lead to. Healthcare facilities, special considerations. Healthcare is kind of a different deal. They have very unique requirements. A detailed review of healthcare facility HVAC requirements is outside of the scope of this deck. The scope of this deck was really to focus on your typical commercial applications, office buildings, etc. But there are some specific healthcare recommendations. If you have any projects, you know, medical facilities, hospitals, etc. Building pressurization is probably going to be the key there. And obviously, they're going to have some spaces that probably want to be maintained negatively in terms of the pressure. There is the Carrier OptiClean negative air machine that was announced about a month ago that can be deployed primarily in healthcare environments. There are actually some other applications for it that I'm going to talk about here shortly. But you know, this can be wheeled into a room, a patient room, if you will. And you know, you could have a flexible duct going to the outside, and it can be used to maintain a negative pressure in a space and evacuate. Again, the goal is to evacuate the virus from that space and prevent it from propagating out to other locations. Now, certain spaces you may want to maintain at positive or negative. How you do that really is going to be a function of the layout of the mechanical equipment. I can't really give you a playbook that says here's exactly how to do that. It's all going to depend on the mechanical layout of the equipment, the ducting, the zone dampers, what controls you have. But again, if you're called upon to do it, you may find that some changes to the way the zone dampers are operating could help achieve a negative pressure in a space, or more likely spaces in the perimeter would be maintained at a positive pressure relative to the target location. So again, healthcare is kind of a different deal. You don't normally have to worry too much about positive or negative pressure, in a typical commercial office building. Excuse me. Some additional guidance for healthcare environments. Again, this is guidance that was linked from the Better Building Solutions website that's part of the DOE. Make sure the toilet exhausts remain on. Control the negative pressure in rooms with infectious patients. Provide 100% exhaust in patient rooms. Increase the outdoor air changes from 2 per hour to 6. Again, that is going to be challenging. You might be required to provide some additional instrumentation. You'll need to know more about the actual physical design of the facility. But again, these are suggestions from ASHRAE in terms of healthcare environments in particular. Okay, how to adjust iView controls to meet the current guidance. Okay. Some things to think about before you make any changes. In warm weather climates, indoor temperature and humidity has to be carefully monitored and controlled to make sure you're still maintaining some degree of occupant comfort. You don't want to push set point changes to the point where the humidity levels could be damaging to the building or its contents. Again, for probably the 8th time, expanding set points could be beneficial as an energy savings measure, because increasing ventilation in and of itself is probably going to use more energy. So ideally, you want to try to help offset that as much as you can. In cold weather climates, freeze protection is obviously an issue. A lot of this guidance doesn't seem to address what's going to happen in the winter if we're still worried about COVID-19. Freeze protection is key. We've recently done a lot of updates to our Logic library to improve how our freeze protection sequences work. So you want to make sure that you're running the latest and greatest applications. Higher amounts of outside air just might not be possible unless you have additional heating capacity. I'd imagine in Wisconsin or in Chicago, in the middle of the winter, you're not going to want to drive that outside air damper open beyond a certain point. The system's not going to be designed for it. One thing we don't recommend is making arbitrary changes to the amount of outside air intake without really doing a careful analysis of the capacity of the equipment. The customer might say, well, can you increase it by 20% above my design minimum, or 30% or 40%? I would not implement a change like that unless you understand the true capacity of the equipment as to whether or not it can tolerate that kind of an increase. Again, middle of summer on a design day, middle of winter on a design day, you have to be really careful in terms of increasing the ventilation. And again, there will be applications where it's just not possible. Again, you're going to use more energy if you attempt to comply with this guidance. And I'll point out probably the best document I've read so far that talks about concerns relative to that is the Taylor Engineering white paper. So of all the things that I've linked to you, I'd recommend that you make sure that you download the Taylor paper and read it before you have a conversation with your customer. Okay, I did say we were going to talk about iView, and these are some of the adjustments that we think you could do if you're asked to try to comply with this guidance. Again, you'll see the ASHRAE paper, the ASHRAE documentation, and the Taylor paper. They recommend not using DCV in its traditional way, where you're attempting to allow lower than design ventilation rates. Really, the ASHRAE doesn't explain why. Taylor paper actually does, and it basically says that, as you probably know, you're trying to maintain a ventilation rate that is lower than design. There is some lag in how the DCV algorithms work, and the concern Taylor had was that if you had a space and there are only a couple of people in the space, it's likely that their output of CO2 might not be high enough to reach a level where the DCV algorithm would begin to bring the ventilation rate up to the design minimum. And obviously, it is known that person-to-person transmission can be very likely if someone's not wearing a mask, if they're too close to each other, all the social distancing stuff, easy for you to say. So their recommendation is basically reset your logic so that even your minimum IAQ DCV setting is what the design minimum is, right? So that's the recommendation there. That's really all you can do at the zone level, VAV or VBT. So either you're changing your airflow set points or changing your damper position, VBT, which is pressure dependent. Rooftop units, again, adjust the minimum airflow to match the unit design, the minimum design. So single zone rooftops that are doing DCV, again, have a similar strategy. What they're recommending is don't allow the minimum to go below the minimum design airflow rate, which I guess typically is 20 CFM per person. Disable or raise the economizer switchover point. Again, this is in situations where you're trying to increase the amount of ventilation. Obviously, you have to go back to the concerns about the capacity of the unit, but they're recommending, if you're going to push the economizer open further, to raise the OA switchover or the enthalpy switchover point. As I mentioned, what to do in terms of DCV, dehumidification. Again, if you're wanting to maintain between 40 and 60, you may have to look at your set points. Filter media, again, this is a great concern. If they choose to increase the filter media, you'll need to adjust the DP switch settings, assuming you're doing it with a switch-based sensor. It's an analog. You'll maybe have a set point in your logic to adjust. If filter statuses are not present, we do recommend that they be installed, or you can recommend to your customer that they be installed. Again, the NSA and the NSB line has some suitable sensors that can be used for that purpose. Air handler units, you're going to have a bit more flexibility there, because if you're dealing with a field install control on a Carrier 39 series air handler, or somebody else's air handler with field install controls, you probably program that either with library logic or logic from your own design. Is what I was trying to say. So again, making the adjustments necessary to achieve increased ventilation would probably be a little bit easier, because again, in a PIC, you can't really make any changes to the logic to put in any sort of a limiting sequence like I spoke of earlier. So same sort of adjustments here. Raise your OA switchover, your enthalpy switchover, set your DCV minimum, disable ERV controls if possible, adjust your air volume controls to maintain negative or positive if you're in an application that has, say, fan tracking, dehumidification adjustments, humidification adjustments, filter media, same guidance there. I mentioned we did speak to the product managers for the rooftop guy, and the rooftop guys, excuse me, they had a significant amount of concerns, if you will, about just what you can and cannot do with their equipment. And I apologize. I don't know what's going on with PowerPoint, but periodically it just shuts off. Give me a second. Let me relaunch the presentation. I don't know if anybody else in my group has seen that happen, but you know what? It's kind of annoying.
It happened to me yesterday for the very first time.
Okay, bear with me here. I guess it's this document recovery stuff, which, you know, normally is a good idea, but I'm not really happy with it happening in the middle of a presentation. So, okay, are you again seeing my full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. At least I haven't had any burning eggs, you know. Okay, so these are bits of guidance we got from the rooftop guys. Again, they emphasize the benefit of potentially recommissioning your equipment if it has been shut down for several months, an evaluation of the filters for cleanliness, proper installation. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, and that is, you know, if you're replacing your filters and you're increasing their effectiveness in terms of, you know, attempting to limit or trap virus, the ASHRAE is recommending that whoever's doing the filter replacement do so with personal protective equipment. So there's a link to that. I didn't catalog what they recommend, but they actually have a link with specific safety suggestions. I don't imagine too many people on the call are the guys that will be changing filters, but if your office finds that you're doing maintenance and filters are being changed, I'd direct you to the ASHRAE article and make sure you do it safely. As I mentioned earlier, if filter status is not present, it can be added. Most of our controllers support it. You have a line of sensors. You know, inspect the moving components, belts, bearings, fans, etc. Inspect all your air ducts for leaks. Do they need to be cleaned? So again, just good, solid mechanical guidance when you're bringing a unit back online after a prolonged shutdown. Again, if you're going to make adjustments to your outside air intake, you have to consider that impact on your cooling and heating loads. You know, again, your systems are not typically sized for significant amounts of outside air. If you choose to do so, you know, you might have to make some changes to the equipment to increase its capacity, which obviously is not something that can be done easily. You want to make sure that if you're increasing your airflow, be cognizant of how that's affecting the pressurization in the building. As I mentioned, ERVs can be disabled, but the equipment guys flag the idea that if you enable an ERV, and the ERV took a considerable amount of the load, if you will, you got to be aware that that's going to go away and make sure the remaining capacity of the equipment can deal with the volumes of the untreated air. Filtration, there are limits to how much, you know, the highest MERV rating that a given piece of equipment can tolerate. If you install it, you're going to have a higher pressure drop. That's going to affect your airflow capacity. They do have a recommendation in terms of use deeper filters to reduce the air drop. I'm not an expert on filtration, but they recommend a 4-inch deep MERV 13 will have a lower pressure drop than a 2. So if you're in a discussion with your customer about improving filtration, this is the guidance from our rooftop product managers. Again, you might have to increase the speed of the fan if you do a significant increase in pressure. And again, evaluate the filter racks. Consider additional filtration if possible. Again, these are things that could potentially be difficult to achieve. Again, I mentioned safety in terms of your filter maintenance program. This is a new piece of information that just was provided to me yesterday. The OptiClean, which hopefully you guys know a little bit about from the marketing releases, originally his design was deployed to create negative pressure zones. What was shared with me yesterday is that they're actually looking to optimize it for use as an air scrubber with HEPA filters, and the application that I saw was installing one or more OptiCleans in a classroom. And basically it's just to recirculate and clean the air that's in the room. That would be usually beneficial in cases where the existing HVAC equipment, you just were limited in how much outside air you could bring in for filtration. So an alternate approach is to use the OptiClean in a scrubber scenario. I know this is a product that is available through TEC, through our distribution channels. So something to keep in mind if you are at a customer facility and you take a look and it's like that you just can't bring in the amount of outside air necessary. This is an alternate approach to cleaning the air in the space. And again, one more time, just for in case anyone didn't hear it the first 6 times, if you're bringing in more outside air, you're going to be increasing the energy consumption. So along those lines, all of these things are going to come at a cost. If the customer is interested in undertaking some of this, either controls updates, mechanical updates, there's something called the 2020 CARES Act that provides significant tax benefits for qualified HVAC expenditures. So what that all means is that I think if I read this correctly, and again, I'm far from a tax expert, but any expense that they incur, and this goes back all the way to January 1, 2018. I'm not sure why that is, but any expense they incur specific to their HVAC, they can depreciate it, I think, in 1 year. So I would encourage you, if the customer is not aware of this, to take a look at this, and you can print out our brochure or our PD sheet that talks about the 2020 CARES Act, because, again, one of the pushbacks from the customer is probably going to be, hey, this is all great, but this is going to cost a lot of money. This could provide a substantial benefit and help address the concern of cost. So we're getting down to the end here. And again, practical considerations. Again, this is all the best information available right now from ASHRAE, DOE, CDC at the time it was prepared. Also company sources. So, there is some debate in the industry as to the correct way to proceed, but this is the best information I have for you today. It's going to be up to the customer to decide what they want to do. It's interesting to me that I think 80% of you said that there has been some outreach from your customers, so obviously they're aware of some of this potentially. Presenting the options to the customer, again, it's not unexpected that there might be some pushback. So the best solution there is to point them to the that we're referencing.
Good. I was just thinking of you yesterday.
Can somebody mute their phone, please?
Well, it's never good, Mike, but we'll just go with that. How about that, okay? Let's not ruin it for today.
Somebody needs that.
Tom,
Okay.
can you mute him?
Full or even
Your line is now muted.
2020.
Actually, I got it the other way around because I wasn't Joey, but I think that's the office playing with us, so that's
Okay, we've got some resources here for you, and first off, ASHRAE.
No, I know that's what he said, but he said, yeah, you got a lot on your plate, which is fine. I don't think it's emergency, but what's going on? But we can hold a little bit.
All right, if we can't get the phone muted, we'll just have to call it a day here, guys.
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, there is no one else I can mute.
Okay.
Okay, it sounds quiet at the moment.
Just put people in broadcast mode if you have to.
Okay, look, we got to wrap this up. We're 8 minutes to go. ASHRAE.org, here's the link at the bottom of the page. This is where 99% of the information that I shared with you in this presentation comes from. So I would highly recommend step 1, if you have not done so, go to this page and all of the documents can be downloaded. The ASHRAE statement's all here. The next 2 pages, we're not going to go through these, but all the individual documents that I thought would be beneficial, I linked them specifically, so you don't have to go hunting for them. Okay. We will make this available after the presentation. I have one.
And we have 1.5 seconds on the return, or we're just full return. Hold on 1 second. I'm having a problem here.
Okay, right. You guys can still hear me. This is the last poll everywhere question I have. And basically, as a result of this presentation, do you plan to reach out to any of your customers regarding changes to the operation of their equipment due to the pandemic? So let's leave this up for a couple of minutes. Don, are you seeing this, or are you seeing a gray screen again?
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay. Looks like we're getting some response here, so that's good.
Yeah, I put everyone into broadcast mode, so we should not have any more interference.
Okay.
But that also does mean at the end, people, if you have any questions, you may need to type those in. So please go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing 100% feedback here, and I guess we had 80% already said that there had been some conversations with their customers. So this is great news. This is great news. We've spent a lot of time putting this all together, and obviously the situation on the ground seems to change daily. So I'm happy to see that this hopefully will be some benefit when you are engaged with your customer. Now, with that said, we have a few minutes left for just general Q&A. Again, I'm not sure how we're going to do that with people muted, but I guess, Dom, if you try to unmute them, maybe the offending phone has been taken offline. But okay, I guess I was muted. Hey, Dom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm not seeing if anyone's typing any questions. So if you are seeing that, or it could read them, and I'll try to respond to them.
Yeah, so I am not seeing any questions at this time. But again, if anyone does have any questions,
Your line is now unmuted.
then I'm going to go ahead and manually unmute people through the interface here. So if you have your phone on mute, you can hopefully just unmute it, and you'll be able to ask any questions that you have.
Okay. All right. Well, it seems pretty quiet, Dom. I think this was the tail end. Do you want to say a few parting words, or?
Certainly, yes. So again, we'll leave it open here at the end in case anyone does have any questions. We'll leave it open for a few more minutes. We're 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so while we're waiting for any additional questions, I just want to say thank you for everyone joining. We realize that 2 hour long calls 2 days in a row is definitely a big commitment. We appreciate that commitment and that time that you've given us. Hopefully we've made it worth your while, and we've provided information in these presentations that that you find benefit with. And with that, we will be putting out a survey following this meeting, just to gauge, again, how useful this information was, and hopefully we'll be able to actually get together in person in the near future versus virtual. But I thought this actually worked pretty well. Few glitches here and there, especially with the WebEx link starting off not working for everyone. But again, we greatly appreciate you working through this with us and spending the time and committing to Carrier. So with that, again, I'll leave it open for another minute or two here. Any questions come in? Otherwise, thank you for attending and have a great day.
Thanks for putting this all together, Dom, and everyone on the line. We will have a recording of this session as well as the other one for you or any of your techs if they're interested. Just let us know.
Excellent. Thanks, Sal.
Hey Sal, does it have the video of our cameras too?
Yep.
I'd kind of like to save the video of Rich discovering that his house was on fire.
I'll send you the link, Brian.
Thanks, yes.
One for the other. I was kind of moving slowly, Rich. I would have been moving quicker.